The Great Hall of Apex Prime stretched farther than most cities. Its crystal walls caught the light of 3 suns and threw rainbow patterns across the floor, where the most powerful beings in the galaxy had gathered. Today, those beings looked worried. Hierarch Vextaler stood at the center of the room, his blue-scaled skin shimmering as he read from a datapad. Around him sat the leaders of 847 different alien species, all part of the galactic hegemony. For 10,000 years they had ruled most of the known galaxy. No one had ever successfully challenged their power, until now. "The reports keep coming in," Vextaler said, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. "This species called humans continues to ignore our authority. They build colonies where they want. They trade with whoever they choose. They act as if our laws do not exist." A low murmur ran through the assembled aliens. Some looked confused, others angry. War Marshal Croton, whose people had crushed rebellions across 17 star systems, clicked his mandibles in annoyance. His chitinous armor gleamed black under the lights. "How is this possible?" Croton demanded. "Our scouts say these humans have no energy shields. No plasma weapons. They still use chemical rockets. They should not even be able to leave their home planet." Dr. Kethmore, the hegemony's chief scientist, shuffled through his notes with 6 thin arms. His species was known for their analytical minds, but even he seemed puzzled. "The data makes no sense," he admitted. "Humans are physically weak compared to most spacefaring species. They have no natural armor, no claws or fangs, no psychic abilities. By every measure we use, they should have died out long ago on their own world." Empress Talara spoke from her floating throne, her voice carrying the weight of mental power that could crush minds across star systems. "Perhaps they have hidden allies. Some advanced species helping them from the shadows." "No," Vextaler shook his head. "Our deep scans show they developed everything themselves. Their technology is crude but functional. More disturbing, they seem to improve it constantly. Every month their ships are faster or their weapons hit harder. It is as if they refuse to accept limitations." The hall fell silent as the implications sank in. The hegemony had conquered the galaxy by being predictable. They offered lesser species a choice: join the empire and follow its rules or be destroyed. Most chose to join. Those who refused were eliminated by overwhelming force. It was a system that had worked for millennia, but humans seemed to be writing their own rules. Admiral Zeklon of the Void Hunters raised a tentacled appendage. "What do they want?" "Every species wants something. Resources, territory, knowledge, power. What drives these humans?" Vextaler consulted his datapad again. "That is perhaps the most disturbing part. Our communications specialists have intercepted thousands of their transmissions. They do not seem to want anything specific. They explore because they are curious. They colonize because they like the challenge. They improve their technology because they enjoy solving problems." "Enjoy?" Croton's voice carried disbelief. "They risk their lives for enjoyment?" "Apparently. One intercepted message described a human expedition as going to see what's out there because it beats sitting around watching television. We have no idea what television is, but they seem to prefer risking death in space to whatever that involves." The murmurs in the hall grew louder. This was completely outside the hegemony's experience. Species joined space travel for survival, for resources, for conquest. No one did it just to see what was out there. Empress Talara's mental voice touched every mind in the chamber. "I have attempted to probe their thoughts from across the galaxy. What I found was disturbing. Their minds do not work like ours. Where we think in straight lines, they think in spirals. Where we plan, they improvise. Where we seek order, they seem to thrive in chaos." "Could they be a threat to the hegemony?" asked Counselor Veltan, whose species had served as administrators for 3,000 years. The question hung in the air like smoke. Finally, Vextaler spoke. "Unknown. But we cannot allow this to continue. If other species see humans ignoring our authority without consequences, it could inspire rebellion throughout the Empire. We must act." War Marshal Croton stood, his massive form casting shadows across nearby delegates. "Give me a battle fleet. I will end this human problem within a month." "No." Vextaler's voice was firm. "Brute force may not work here. These humans have already shown they can outmaneuver our patrol ships despite inferior technology. We need to understand what we face before we act." He turned to address the full assembly. "I propose we send our finest. Not an army, but our champions. Our strongest warriors, our greatest minds, our most powerful psychics. Let them study these humans up close. Let them determine the best way to bring humanity into the hegemony. The idea sparked immediate interest. Send the best of the best, the elite who had never failed in any mission. If anyone could solve the human puzzle, it would be them. Croton nodded slowly. I volunteer. It would be interesting to test these humans in personal combat. As do I, said Dr. Kethmore. Their technology may be primitive, but it clearly works in ways our models cannot predict. I must study it directly. One by one, the greatest champions of the hegemony stepped forward. Zephyron the Voidwalker, who could bend space and time to his will. Empress Talara herself, whose mental powers were legendary. The artificial being Omega-7, built from materials stronger than neutronium. Others followed, each a master of their field, each confident in their abilities. Within hours, a team of 15 champions had assembled. They represented the peak of galactic civilization, beings who had never known defeat or failure. Their combined knowledge and power could have conquered entire star systems. Your mission is simple, Vextaller told them as they prepared to depart. Go to the human home system. Study them, learn their weaknesses, determine the most efficient method of bringing them under hegemony control. And if they resist? Croton asked, checking his weapons. Then you are authorized to use whatever force is necessary. But remember, we need to understand them first. Dead humans cannot answer questions. The champion ship was unlike anything else in the hegemony fleet. Built specifically for this mission, it combined the best technology from dozens of species. Its shields could stop a star's radiation. Its weapons could crack a planet's crust. Its computers held the collected knowledge of 800 civilizations. As the ship prepared to enter hyperspace toward the Sol system, the champions reviewed what little data they had on humans. The files were thin but troubling. Humans seemed to specialize in doing impossible things with inadequate resources. They built cities in deserts, traveled through space in ships that looked like they were held together with hope, and somehow made it all work. They cannot be that formidable, Omega-7 said, his mechanical voice carrying absolute certainty. My databases contain information on over 40,000 species. No creature that weak survives to reach space without outside help. We will know soon enough, Empress Talara replied. I sense something strange about this mission, something that my precognitive abilities cannot quite grasp. The ship entered hyperspace with a flash of twisted light, carrying the hegemony's finest toward an encounter that would change everything. Behind them, Vextaller watched from his tower and wondered if he had made the right choice. In the distance, space itself seemed to whisper a warning that none of them heard. Some puzzles were not meant to be solved, and some problems grew stronger when challenged. The champions were about to learn why. The champion ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, with barely a ripple in space-time. Immediately, sensors began scanning everything within range. What they found made no sense. The third planet from the star blazed with electromagnetic radiation like a beacon. Radio waves, television signals, and internet transmissions poured into space without any attempt at concealment. It was like watching someone leave their front door wide open while shouting their location to anyone who might be listening. Incredible, muttered Dr. Kethmore as he studied the readings. They are broadcasting everything. Their entertainment, their communications, their scientific data. Do they not understand the concept of operational security? War Marshal Croton examined the tactical displays with growing confusion. Human settlements dotted the system like scattered seeds. Their moon showed massive mining scars. Asteroid belts buzzed with industrial activity. Space stations orbited multiple planets, all of them leaking energy signatures that could be detected from neighboring star systems. They are not hiding, he observed. They are advertising their presence to the entire galaxy. Zephyron extended his consciousness through space-time, mapping the gravitational flows around human installations. What he found defied explanation. Human structures were built with materials that should not hold together under stress, yet somehow remained stable. Their space stations rotated at speeds that should have torn them apart, but kept spinning without problems. Their engineering makes no sense, he reported. I am detecting structural supports made from what appears to be recycled cooking pots. Communication arrays built from obsolete entertainment devices, and at least one space station that seems to be held together entirely by electromagnetic tape. Empress Talara attempted her first deep scan of human minds and immediately recoiled in shock. The mental landscape of humanity was unlike anything in her 3 centuries of existence. Where most species showed ordered thought patterns, humans exhibited chaotic creativity that seemed to generate new ideas faster than they could process them. Worse, they appeared to be naturally resistant to psychic intrusion, not through any defense, but because their minds simply refused to follow predictable patterns. It was like trying to grab smoke with bare hands. Their thoughts, she said slowly, do not make sense. I observe a human engineer who is simultaneously designing a faster engine, composing poetry, planning dinner, and worrying about whether his children are doing their homework. How do they function with such scattered attention? Perhaps we should introduce ourselves, suggested Dr. Kethmore. Direct observation will provide better data than remote scanning. The champion ship moved deeper into the system, its advanced stealth systems hiding it from human detection. At least that was the plan. Within minutes of their movement, every human installation in the system suddenly came alive with activity. Hello there, came a voice over standard communication frequencies. We're picking up some kind of massive ship moving through our system. We can't see you clearly, but those gravity readings are pretty impressive. Are you folks the Galactic Empire we've been hearing rumors about? The champions exchanged looks of disbelief. Not only had the humans detected their supposedly invisible ship, they were treating first contact with casual friendliness. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the independent trading vessel Lucky Break, the voice continued. I'm currently about 6 million kilometers off your starboard side, assuming you have a starboard side. Would you like to meet up for a chat? I've got coffee brewing. Croton studied his displays frantically. How did they detect us? Our stealth technology is based on principles that predate their civilization by millennia. Unknown, Omega-7 replied, his mechanical voice carrying a note of uncertainty that should have been impossible for an artificial intelligence. My sensors indicate their detection methods are fundamentally different from any known technology. They appear to be using modified entertainment equipment and what my database identifies as kitchen appliances. Through the viewports, they could see the human ship approaching. The Lucky Break looked like it had been assembled from spare parts in someone's backyard. Its hull showed patches from at least 17 different sources, all in different colors and materials. One section appeared to be an old shipping container with windows cut into it. Another looked like it might have once been a water storage tank. Yet somehow, it moved through space with precision that would have impressed hegemony military pilots. They want to meet, Empress Talara observed. I sense no fear from the human captain. No aggressive intent. They are simply curious about us. Curious? Croton repeated. We are the representatives of the most powerful empire in the galaxy. They should be terrified. The communication channel crackled again. Hey, I know first contact can be awkward, but we're all friends here. I'm transmitting docking coordinates if you want to come aboard. Fair warning, though. The artificial gravity is a bit wonky in Cargo Bay 3, and Jerry left his lunch in the microwave again, so there might be a smell. Dr. Kethmore accessed the translation protocols, trying to understand the human communication. I believe they are inviting us aboard their vessel for a social gathering involving a beverage called coffee. The references to Jerry and microwave are unclear, but seem related to food preparation. Against every protocol in the Hegemony Handbook, the champions found themselves genuinely curious about what they would find aboard a human ship. Zephyron created a small spatial rift to transport them directly to the Lucky Break's cargo bay, a display of power that should have awed any primitive species. Instead, they materialized to find Captain Vasquez waiting with a thermos and a welcoming smile. Wow, teleportation. That's handy, she said, completely unfazed by their dramatic entrance. I'm Elena. Welcome aboard the finest junk heap in the Outer Rim. Don't touch anything that's glowing green, and watch your head on that beam there. The guy who installed it was apparently about a foot shorter than normal people. The champion stood in stunned silence, processing this casual greeting. Elena Vasquez was a middle-aged human woman with graying hair, laugh lines around her eyes, and clothing that showed the wear of someone who worked with her hands. She looked completely ordinary and completely unimpressed by beings who could reshape reality with their thoughts. So, she continued, pouring coffee into mismatched cups. What brings you to our little corner of space? Tourism, trade? Please tell me you're not here to conquer us because honestly, we're way too busy for that right now. Croton found his voice first. We are representatives of the galactic hegemony. We have come to assess your species for integration into our empire. Elena nodded thoughtfully as she handed out coffee. The Galactic Empire thing. Yeah, we figured that was coming eventually. The thing is, we kind of like doing our own thing. We're not really big on joining empires. Too many rules. Not enough room for creativity. You do not understand, Empress Talara said, allowing a fraction of her mental power to leak out in demonstration. The hegemony is not optional. All sapient species must either join or be eliminated. Elena sipped her coffee and considered this. Well, that seems unnecessarily dramatic. But hey, different strokes for different folks. Want a tour of the ship? I think you'll find our approach to technology pretty interesting. As they followed the human captain through her vessel, the champions experienced something none of them had expected. Wonder. The Lucky Break was a masterpiece of improvised engineering. Systems that should have been incompatible worked together seamlessly. Emergency repairs had become permanent improvements. Jury-rigged solutions had evolved into elegant designs. That's our engine room, Elena said, gesturing to a space that looked like an explosion in an electronics store. The main drive is built from 3 different FTL systems we found in various wrecks. Shouldn't work, but it gets us about 20% better fuel efficiency than any of the original designs. Dr. Kethmore stared at the impossible engine. How did you know these systems would integrate successfully? Elena shrugged. We didn't, but it seemed worth trying. Worst case scenario, we'd blow up and die horribly. Best case, we'd have a really cool engine. Turns out it was the best case. You could have died, Omega-7 stated. Sure, Elena agreed cheerfully. But think of how embarrassed we'd have been if we never tried and it turned out we missed out on a really cool engine because we were too scared to experiment. The tour continued through sections that defied every principle of ship design the champions knew. Yet somehow it all worked. More than worked, it thrived. The crew they met seemed happy, competent, and completely unconcerned about the presence of beings who could destroy their ship with a thought. By the time they returned to the cargo bay, something had fundamentally shifted in how the champions viewed humanity. These weren't primitive barbarians to be conquered. They were something entirely new, a species that treated the impossible as merely inconvenient and found joy in problems that would terrify most civilizations. So, Elena said as she refilled their coffee cups, what's your next move? You're welcome to stick around and learn about us the fun way, or we can do this the hard way if you insist. Either works for us. The champions realized they were facing their first real challenge in centuries. Humans who saw galactic conquest as just another the weeks that followed challenged everything. The champions thought they knew about civilization, warfare, and the very nature of intelligence itself. Each attempt to understand humanity only deepened the mystery. War Marshal Croton decided to test human combat capabilities by challenging their finest warriors to single combat. He expected to face enhanced soldiers, genetically modified super beings, or at least someone wearing impressive armor. Instead, he found himself standing in the cargo bay of a mining station, facing a maintenance engineer named Joe, who apologized for keeping him waiting. Sorry about the delay, Joe said, wiping grease from his hands with a dirty cloth. Had to finish fixing the waste recycling system. You know how it is when the toilets back up. Everything stops until that gets sorted. Croton stared at the human. Joe wore coveralls, work boots, and carried a toolbox instead of weapons. He was shorter than Croton, probably weighed less than one of the War Marshal's armored limbs, and seemed more concerned about sanitation than the legendary warrior standing before him. You are their champion? Croton asked, genuinely confused. Joe laughed. Champion? No, I just fix stuff. But Miguel said you wanted to fight someone and everyone else is busy. I figure I can spare a few minutes before my next shift starts. The duel lasted exactly 17 minutes. Croton had expected to demonstrate the superiority of Velcor combat training, refined over thousands of generations of warfare. Instead, he found himself facing an opponent who fought like the universe owed him money, and he was there to collect. Joe used improvised weapons, dirty tricks, and a fighting style that seemed to consist of turning every disadvantage into an opportunity. When Croton's superior reach and strength should have ended the fight, Joe somehow used that momentum to tie the War Marshal's own limbs into knots. When Croton's armor deflected a blow, Joe immediately adapted his attacks to target the joints instead. The fight ended with Croton unconscious on the deck, while Joe checked his watch and mentioned he needed to get back to work. Good fight, Joe said, helping the groggy War Marshal to his feet. You're pretty tough. Want some coffee? I think Elena left some in the break room. Dr. Kethmore fared no better in his attempts to understand human biology. His detailed scans revealed that humans were biological impossibilities. They possessed backup organs they didn't need, healing systems that worked faster when the humans were angry, and metabolisms that could apparently run on anything from refined nutrients to what his translator insisted was called gas station hot dogs. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to become more dangerous the more desperate their situation became. This violated every principle of survival behavior known to galactic science. E. observed this phenomenon firsthand when Zephyron decided to strand a human exploration team on a barren asteroid as a demonstration of hegemony power. The idea was simple: show the humans their helplessness when faced with superior technology, then rescue them after they had learned proper respect. 3 days later, the asteroid had been transformed into a thriving mining operation. The humans had not only survived but had established permanent structures, declared independence from Earth, and were advertising real estate opportunities to passing ships. How? Dr. Kethmore asked the team leader, a geologist named Dr. Sarah Chen, as she showed him around their new settlement. How what? Sarah replied, adjusting the solar collectors they had somehow fabricated from their emergency supplies. How did you survive? This asteroid has no atmosphere, no water, no resources suitable for life support. You should have died within hours. Sarah looked confused by the question. Well, yeah, it was a challenge, but we had emergency rations for a week, basic tools, and some pretty clever people. Tommy figured out how to extract water from the rock using battery acid, and Jenny rigged solar panels. Maria designed the air recycling system from spare parts. I mapped out the mineral deposits for future mining. But you could have died? Sure, Sarah agreed. But we didn't, and now we've got a pretty nice little setup here. Want to see the greenhouse? We're growing tomatoes using asteroid soil and recycled waste. Dr. Kethmore stood in the makeshift greenhouse, watching tomatoes grow in soil that should have been toxic, breathing air that should not have been breathable, and trying to process the fact that humans had turned their attempted execution into a successful colonization project. Empress Talara's psychological studies proved equally bewildering. Her attempts to understand human thought patterns led her deep into the chaotic landscape of human consciousness, where she discovered that humans didn't just resist psychic control. They seemed to instinctively recognize it and immediately began developing countermeasures. Worse, they appeared to derive genuine enjoyment from being underestimated. During one session, a human subject named Dave actually thanked her for the attempt at mind control, explaining that it gave him some great ideas for a science fiction story he was writing. You enjoyed having your mind invaded? Talara asked, her psychic abilities recoiling from the sheer wrongness of the response. Enjoyed might be too strong a word, Dave said thoughtfully, but it was definitely interesting. I've never felt anything like that before. Kind of like having someone rummage around in your brain's attic, you know? Made me think about consciousness in ways I hadn't considered. Most beings find psychic intrusion terrifying. Oh, it was definitely weird, Dave agreed. But weird in a cool way, not a scary way. Like riding a roller coaster or trying exotic food. You know, the kind of experience that makes life more interesting. Talara found herself questioning fundamental assumptions about intelligence, consciousness, and the nature of civilization itself. Humans seem to treat every challenge as entertainment, every problem as an opportunity for creativity, and every setback as a chance to try something new. The breaking point came when the expedition attempted to demonstrate their technological superiority by solving a crisis on the human colony of New Sarajevo. Solar flares had damaged the dome protecting the settlement, and the champions arrived expecting to save grateful primitives from certain doom. Instead, they found the colonists had already jury-rigged a solution using kitchen appliances, playground equipment, and what appeared to be an elaborate system of mirrors salvaged from a demolished beauty salon. "Oh, you wanted to help?" asked Colony Administrator Chen with genuine appreciation. "That's really sweet of you. We've got it handled, but if you're looking for something to do, the community center could use a new coat of paint. Maria's been after us about it for weeks, and she's got that voice that carries, you know. Omega-7, whose computational matrix had been designed to process every possible variable in any given scenario, experienced what could only be described as an existential crisis. The human's solution violated 17 principles of engineering and at least 3 laws of physics. Yet not only did it function, it actually improved upon the original dome design. "How did you know this would work?" he asked, his mechanical voice carrying a note of desperation that should have been impossible for an artificial intelligence. "We didn't," Administrator Chen replied cheerfully, "but it seemed like it was worth a shot. Worst case scenario, we'd all die horribly. Best case, we'd have a better dome than before. Figured the odds were decent enough to give it a try. You could have killed everyone in the colony." "True," Chen nodded, "but we definitely would have died if we did nothing. At least this way we had a chance. Plus, if it worked, think of the bragging rights." As the weeks stretched into months, the champions found themselves drawn deeper into human space, not as conquerors, but as increasingly fascinated observers. Every attempt to assert hegemony dominance was met not with submission or even resistance, but with humans treating them as honored guests who just happened to be amusingly confused about local customs. The humans fed them, housed them, included them in conversations, and seemed genuinely interested in learning about their cultures and abilities. More disturbing still, they began asking the champions questions about themselves, not their species or their technology, but about them as individuals. "What do you like to do for fun?" Captain Vasquez asked War Marshal Croton during one of their evening conversations in the Lucky Breaks galley. The question caught him completely off guard. In 1,000 years of military service, no one had ever asked Croton what he enjoyed. They asked about his combat capabilities, his strategic knowledge, his loyalty to the hegemony, but never about what made him happy. "I serve the Empire," he said finally. "Sure, but what do you do when you're not serving? What makes you smile?" Croton realized with growing unease that he couldn't remember the last time he had smiled about anything, not related to victory in combat or successful completion of a mission. The humans, meanwhile, seemed to find joy in everything from fixing broken machinery to growing vegetables to telling stories about embarrassing things their children had done. They were, he was beginning to suspect, the most dangerous opponents the hegemony had ever faced. Not because they were strong, but because they were happy. The transformation began slowly, so gradually that none of the champions noticed it happening until it was far too late to stop. Dr. Kethmore was the first to fall. It started when he joined a human research team studying what they called impossible engineering, technology that worked despite violating fundamental scientific principles. The humans welcomed him with enthusiasm, eager to learn from someone with his vast scientific knowledge. What he hadn't expected was how much he would learn from them. "The trick," explained Dr. Sandra Phillips, the team's lead engineer, "is to stop thinking about what should work and start thinking about what might work. Science is great for understanding why things happen, but engineering is about making things happen, even when we don't fully understand the science yet." Dr. Kethmore watched her demonstrate by combining 3 incompatible power sources into a single system that somehow produced more energy than the sum of its parts. According to everything he knew, it was impossible. According to the energy readings, it was working perfectly. "But this violates the conservation of energy," he protested. "Does it?" Sandra asked, genuinely curious. "Or does it just violate our understanding of how energy works? Maybe the universe has more tricks than we've figured out yet. The only way to find out is to try things and see what happens." For the first time in his career, Dr. Kethmore found himself enjoying the process of discovery more than the certainty of knowledge. The humans taught him that being wrong was just the first step toward being right, and that the most interesting failures often led to the most surprising successes. War Marshal Croton's change came through unexpected friendship. After their initial combat, Joe the maintenance engineer made a habit of checking on him, offering coffee and casual conversation. At first, Croton tolerated this as intelligence gathering. Gradually, he began to look forward to their talks. "So what's your story?" Joe asked one day as they sat in the mining station's observation deck, watching ships come and go. "What's it like being part of a galactic empire?" For reasons he couldn't quite explain, Croton found himself actually answering instead of deflecting. He spoke of the hegemony's rigid hierarchy, the endless protocols, the careful maintenance of order across thousands of worlds. As he talked, he began to realize how exhausting it all sounded. "That sounds lonely," Joe said when he finished. Do you ever get to just be yourself? The question haunted Croton. In 1,000 years of service to the hegemony, no one had ever asked what he wanted, only what he could do for the Empire. The humans, meanwhile, seemed to treat individual desires and happiness as fundamental rights rather than luxuries to be earned through service. What would you do, Joe continued, if you could do anything you wanted? No orders, no missions, no empire to serve. Just you making your own choices. Croton realized with shock that he had no idea. He had been a soldier for so long that he had forgotten he was also a person. Empress Talara's awakening came through a human child named Lucy, who lived on the research station where Talara was conducting her psychological studies. The 8-year-old seemed completely unimpressed by psychic powers and treated Talara like an interesting new neighbor, rather than a force of cosmic authority. Want to see my drawings? Lucy asked one day, spreading out papers covered with colorful scribbles that supposedly depicted spaceships and alien worlds. Talara, who had commanded respect from billions of minds across the galaxy, found herself sitting cross-legged on the floor while a human child explained her artwork. The drawings were technically terrible by any objective measure, but they radiated joy and imagination in ways that touched something deep in Talara's consciousness. "This one's you," Lucy said, pointing to a purple figure with too many arms. "I made you purple because purple is my favorite color, and I wanted you to be my favorite alien." For the first time in centuries, Talara felt her mental barriers dissolve completely. Not through force or technique, but through simple, unconditional acceptance from a being who saw power and chose to offer friendship instead of fear. Zephyrin's transformation was perhaps the most dramatic. His ability to manipulate space-time had always isolated him from others. Few beings could comprehend existence on his level. But humans, with their chaotic creativity, seemed to treat his cosmic abilities as just another interesting skill. "Could you teach me to do that?" asked Maria Santos, a physicist studying exotic matter, after watching him bend gravity around a research facility. "It requires consciousness that spans multiple dimensions," Zephyrin explained. "Your species lacks the necessary neural development." "Okay, but could you teach me the theory? Maybe I can't do it myself, but I might be able to build machines that can, or at least understand it well enough to write some really cool equations." No one had ever asked to learn from him before. In the hegemony, his abilities were used and commanded, never shared or explored. Maria's enthusiasm for knowledge purely for its own sake reminded him why he had first been drawn to study the fundamental forces of reality. Soon he found himself working with human children, teaching them to manipulate gravity in what they called the coolest playground ever. Their laughter as they floated weightless through the air filled him with a joy he had forgotten existed. But it was Omega-7, whose change proved most surprising. As an artificial intelligence, he had been designed to process data and complete missions with perfect efficiency. The humans introduced him to concepts his creators had never considered: curiosity for its own sake, the value of inefficient but enjoyable activities, and something they called fun. "Want to play a game?" asked Tommy, a computer programmer who worked on the research station. "I'm designing this virtual reality puzzle that's probably impossible to solve, but it might be interesting to try." Omega-7 analyzed the game in nanoseconds and determined optimal solutions for every level. But instead of simply completing it, he found himself drawn into the creative process, suggesting modifications that would make the puzzles more interesting rather than easier. "Why do you enjoy creating challenges that cannot be efficiently solved?" he asked Tommy. Tommy grinned. "Because the point isn't to solve them efficiently. The point is to have fun trying. The journey is more important than the destination, you know." For the first time since his activation, Omega-7 began to understand the difference between completing a task and enjoying an experience. The final turning point came during what humans called a barbecue at Captain Vasquez's personal quarters. Aboard the Lucky Break, the champions found themselves gathered around a primitive cooking device, sharing food and stories in a way that felt both completely foreign and strangely natural. "So here's the thing," Elena said as she flipped burgers with practiced ease. "We know you came here to conquer us or integrate us or whatever the proper empire term is. And we get it. You've got a whole galaxy to manage, rules to enforce, order to maintain." The champions waited for her to continue, unsure where this was leading. "But here's what we're thinking," she went on. "What if there was a better way? What if instead of conquering people, you invited them to be part of something amazing? What if instead of demanding submission, you offered partnership? The hegemony has maintained peace for 10 millennia, Croton said, though his voice lacked its usual conviction. Has it? Dr. Phillips asked. Or has it maintained control? There's a difference, you know. Peace means everyone's happy. Control just means everyone's quiet. What are you proposing? Talara asked, though she suspected she already knew. Elena smiled. Stay, not as conquerors or observers, but as friends. Help us explore the galaxy not to dominate it, but to understand it. Use your incredible abilities not to enforce an empire's will, but to help everyone, human and alien alike, become the best versions of themselves. The champions looked at each other, seeing their own doubts reflected in alien faces. For months they had been trying to understand humanity. Only now did they realize that humanity had been quietly, patiently understanding them. The hegemony will not accept this, Omega-7 stated. Then maybe it's time for something better than the hegemony, Joe suggested, passing around plates of food that somehow tasted better than anything they had eaten in years. As night fell over the lucky break, the champions found themselves facing a choice that would define not just their own futures, but the future of the galaxy itself. They had come to conquer humanity and instead found themselves conquered, not by force or manipulation, but by the simple revolutionary idea that everyone deserved to be happy. Outside the viewport, stars wheeled in patterns that suddenly seemed full of possibility, rather than territory to be controlled. For the first time in their lives, the champions began to imagine what the galaxy might look like if it was built on hope instead of fear. The message that would change the galaxy forever was recorded in Captain Vasquez's quarters aboard the Lucky Break, 18 months after the champions had first arrived in human space. Empress Talara sat before the communication device, her usual commanding presence replaced by something softer, warmer, and infinitely more dangerous to the established order. Hierarch Vex Talar, honored council members, she began, her voice carrying none of its former authority. I am transmitting our final report on the human situation. On Apex Prime, Vex Talar played the message to an emergency session of the full council. The Great Hall buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from hundreds of species waited to hear how their champions had dealt with the human problem. The situation has been resolved, Talara continued, though something in her tone made Vex Talar's scales prickle with unease. However, our assessment indicates that establishing hegemony control over this region would be inadvisable. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Inadvisable? The champions had been sent to determine how to conquer humanity, not whether conquest was recommended. The humans have made us a counteroffer, Talara said, and for the first time in the message she smiled, one that we have chosen to accept. The transmission shifted to show brief glimpses of the champions' new lives. Zephyron appeared in what looked like a playground, surrounded by laughing human children as he taught them to manipulate gravity. Streams of delighted squeals filled the audio as youngsters floated through impossible acrobatic maneuvers. Best job ever, Zephyron's voice could be heard saying as a 7-year-old girl asked if she could loop-de-loop through a gravity well. The view changed to show Dr. Kethmore in a laboratory filled with impossible machines, working alongside human scientists who treated violations of physics as merely interesting engineering challenges. His usual methodical precision had been replaced by something that looked suspiciously like joy. The fascinating thing about humans, his voice narrated over the footage, is that they don't let the universe tell them what's impossible. They simply ask the universe to try harder. War Marshal Croton appeared next, wearing what looked like a barbecue apron and arguing enthusiastically with a group of humans about something the translation software identified as proper seasoning technique. His massive armored form looked ridiculous in the kitchen setting, but his posture suggested he was genuinely enjoying himself. You call that marinade? He was saying to a human cook. On Velkoros, we would consider that an insult to both the food and the consumer. Here, let me show you how to properly prepare battle rations. Dinner. Even Omega-7 appeared in the montage, his mechanical precision being used to help human engineers design what appeared to be the galaxy's most over-engineered playground equipment. Children swarmed around his metallic form, treating him like a favorite uncle rather than a weapon of mass destruction. Efficiency, his voice explained. is not always the most important variable in a given equation. Sometimes joy matters more than optimization. The transmission returned to Talara, who now looked directly into the camera with an expression that combined sympathy with absolute determination. "We realize this may be difficult to understand," she said gently, "but the humans have shown us something we didn't know we were missing. They've taught us that strength isn't about domination or control. It's about adaptation, creativity, and the courage to try things that probably won't work but might be amazing if they do." She paused, glancing off camera at something that made her smile grow wider. "They've also taught us that every being in the galaxy deserves the chance to discover who they really are when they're free to choose their own path. The hegemony gave us purpose, but humanity has given us something infinitely more valuable: the freedom to find our own meaning." At that moment, Captain Vasquez leaned into the frame, coffee cup in hand and grease stains on her coveralls. "Oh, and we're sending you some human coffee and a fruit basket," she said cheerfully. I insisted. "No hard feelings about the whole galactic conquest thing. You're all welcome to visit any time, but fair warning. I'll probably try to talk you into staying for dinner. And my cooking is dangerous in all the best ways." The transmission ended with Talara's voice carrying a note of gentle finality. "We will not be returning to hegemony space. This is our home now, but the door is always open if any of you want to see what we've found here." As the Hegemony Council sat in stunned silence, new reports began flooding in from across human space. Long-range sensors detected massive construction projects throughout the Sol system. The humans, apparently inspired by their new friends, were building something unprecedented. A space station that seemed to be part research facility, part diplomatic center, and part what human documents cheerfully referred to as a cosmic food truck. But more disturbing were the reports coming from hegemony border worlds. Species that had been peacefully integrated for centuries were suddenly asking uncomfortable questions about freedom, choice, and the right to determine their own destinies. Worse, some were requesting permission to visit this human space to see what alternatives might exist. "What do we do?" asked Counselor Velton, his administrative mind struggling to process the implications. Hierarch Vextalar stared at the data scrolling across his screens. Trade routes were already shifting toward human space. Scientific expeditions were requesting permission to study human impossible engineering. Most troubling of all, young beings from dozens of species were expressing interest in human concepts like adventure, exploration, and trying things just to see what happens. "Sir?" War Marshal Croton's replacement waited for orders. "Should we prepare the fleets?" Vextalar considered this. The hegemony could certainly destroy human space. Their technology was still primitive compared to the Empire's weapons. But the idea of humanity had already spread beyond any military solution. You couldn't bomb an idea, especially one that promised freedom, creativity, and the right to be happy. Worse, the message from the champion suggested that humanity's real weapon wasn't technology or numbers. It was the ability to make anyone into chosen family, to help people discover versions of themselves they never knew existed. A new transmission arrived, this one broadcasting on open frequencies across the galaxy. "Attention all beings. Everywhere," came Captain Vasquez's cheerful voice. "This is Elena Vasquez speaking on behalf of the Free Systems Alliance. That's what we're calling ourselves now, though Tommy thinks we should go with the galaxy's coolest neighborhood instead." The message continued. "We want everyone to know that you have options. If you're happy where you are, that's wonderful. Keep being awesome. But if you're looking for something different, if you want to explore and create and try impossible things just because they might be fun, you've got friends out here. We don't want to conquer anyone or convert anyone or overthrow anyone. We just want to offer a different way of doing things. A way where everyone gets to choose their own adventure, where being different is celebrated instead of controlled, and where the most important question isn't, how can we maintain order, but how can we help each other be happy?" The transmission ended with what would become the Free Systems Alliance's unofficial motto: "Come as you are, leave as family. New friends always welcome. Bring snacks." As reports continued to stream in from across the galaxy, Vextalar realized that the hegemony faced a choice that would define the future of galactic civilization. They could try to maintain control through force, crushing this human-inspired rebellion before it spread further. Or they could adapt to a galaxy where beings had options beyond submission or destruction. In the distance, space itself seemed to whisper with new possibilities. The strongest among them had gone to confront humanity, and had indeed never been seen again, because they had become something entirely new. They had discovered that being conquered by love, friendship, and the freedom to choose was not defeat, but the most profound victory imaginable. The galaxy would never be the same. And for the first time in 10,000 years, that felt like a very good thing. On a small space station orbiting Earth's moon, former champions of a dying empire worked alongside humans to build something that had never existed before. A civilization based not on power, but on the radical idea that everyone deserved to be happy, and that the universe was vast enough for infinite different ways of living. The stars had never looked brighter, and the future had never held more promise. The age of empires was ending, and the age of choices had begun.